On a February night in 2012, Anchorage was buried under a thick blanket of snow and a deadly kind of silence. The small northern city of Alaska was no stranger to darkness or cold, but nothing could prepare it for the strange emptiness left behind the next morning. The Common Grounds coffee kiosk was still there, its soft yellow lights fading behind fogged-up glass. A cappuccino sat cooling on the counter, the swivel chair slightly askew. No blood, no sign of a struggle. Just no more Samantha Koenig. The security camera across the street captured the last 7 minutes. A man in a dark jacket, face hidden under a hoodie. He walked in, placed an order. Samantha smiled, turned away. But when she turned back, something shifted in her eyes. For just a split second, a blink. No panic, no scream, just recognition. As if she saw something she wasn't supposed to. As if the ending had already been written and the performance was only just beginning. He pulled a gun. No one heard a scream. No sound escaped the walls. She was forced through the side door. In the last seconds of the footage, their shadows stretched long across the snow, then vanish. At first, police thought she ran away. Maybe a fight with a boyfriend. The media hadn't picked up the story. Friends posted a few worried updates online. But somewhere beneath the freezing crust on the edge of town, a hand had already gone cold. A body was being kept, not to be hidden, but to keep playing a role in a show she never agreed to join. And that same night, he walked away from the scene like a stranger passing through. No one called the cops. No one saw a thing. The night stayed quiet. Snow kept falling, and the perfect disappearance. That was the first sign this evil wasn't here to make noise. It came to leave a silence. The kind you can't quite name. Israel Keyes wasn't born in the dark, but he grew up on the edge of the world, where light never reached. No street lights, no schools, no neighbors, just deep woods, hunting rifles, and twisted prayers in a fringe religious cult tucked away in the Washington wilderness. His family, parents, and a swarm of children moved from state to state, avoiding contact with modern society. They believed the government was the enemy, believed textbooks were brainwashing tools, believed kids didn't need teachers, just God. Please learn to read from the Bible. Learn to shoot by gutting wild game. Learn to kill without watching the blood too long. In that world, morality didn't come from laws. It came from silence. His childhood had no friends, no doctors, no holidays. But there were knives, there were guns, and there were long stretches of time alone in the forest, listening to the snap of bird bones breaking in his hand. Farm cats went missing. Squirrels were tied up with wire. He didn't kill for fun. He didn't kill out of hate. He just wanted to know what it felt like. Then he did it again and again until it became a rhythm. When he was a teenager, the family moved to a remote part of Alaska. No one noticed him. No one stopped him. Once, he tied a boy to a tree and taped his mouth shut, just to see how long he'd stay quiet. No one knew, and maybe no one wanted to. In 1998, he joined the military. A strange choice, but it made sense. The military didn't create the monster. It just taught him how to show up on time, how to clean up after himself, how to move without leaving a trail. The military didn't ask why. It just taught how. He was deployed to Egypt, then Fort Lewis, then Fort Hood. His fellow soldiers remembered him as quiet, clean-cut, not much of a drinker. A guy so normal, it was boring. But when he was alone, he was never idle. He drew. He planned. He thought about how to kill without being caught. For Keyes, the army was a lab. Every deployment was an experiment in deadly discipline. When he got out, he didn't kill right away. He waited, watched, moved. From one house to the next gas station, from one map to another. In his mind, a blueprint was taking shape. A network that didn't need motive, didn't need specific victims, just opportunity. Israel Keyes didn't wake up one morning and decide to kill. He didn't snap. He didn't lose his way. He walked a straight line, from a childhood with no voices to a youth with no sense of remorse. And when he finally acted, his hands didn't shake. Because to him, it wasn't a first time, just the next step on a path drawn by a hand no one could see. A path no one else would dare walk. And he had always been at home in the dark. Israel Keyes didn't leave a trace, not because he was good at running, but because he was never standing where anyone thought to look. He didn't kill neighbors, didn't stalk his targets, didn't go online to find victims. He picked them by one principle: random, unfamiliar, unconnected. The only things he needed were time, distance, and the absence of light. Each murder was its own project. No repeats, no signatures, no patterns for investigators to track. That's why for years, he killed, and no one realized it was a series. No one linked the crimes, because there was nothing to link. Keyes never left home with weapons. No knives, no guns, no rope. Instead, he buried his killing tools across multiple states. Years before the crime ever happened, these kill kits held handguns, folding knives, zip ties, masks, duct tape, even bleach and a small shovel. All wrapped tight in plastic, sealed in buckets, buried deep underground, like seeds of death, just waiting to bloom. Every time he acted, he drove or flew thousands of miles, rented a car with cash, used no phone. He stayed in cheap motels or pitched a tent in the woods. He'd walk miles to dig up a kit, then wander through unfamiliar neighborhoods, waiting for a moment. A woman home alone, a couple who just went to bed, someone pumping gas after midnight. No connection, no motive. Just timing. He preferred rain or snow. Weather erased footprints, muffled sound, made cops less eager to investigate outdoor scenes. He parked far from the location, walked through alleyways, switched gloves mid-route. If someone saw him, he'd already changed clothes. If a camera caught him, he was hooded, head down, posture altered. Those tiny details, that's why he stayed invisible for a decade. After each kill, he didn't celebrate, didn't keep souvenirs, didn't brag. He returned the tools to their place, reused them, or buried them again. Then he drove back to the motel, showered, slept. Next morning, he had breakfast, left the city, tossed the burner phone in the trash, as if nothing had happened. He didn't kill back to back, sometimes months, sometimes years in between, but in the gaps, he was still planning, marking maps, using Google Earth to scout burial sites, writing coded notes, every act premeditated, like a cold script running quietly in his head. The scariest part, there was nothing odd about Keyes on the outside. No one called him weird. No one thought he was violent. He didn't hide well because he had something to hide. He just didn't leave anything behind. Death came from absence, not noise. He left no DNA, didn't bite his victims, didn't rape, didn't call, didn't journal, didn't film. No sexual motive, no financial motive, no revenge. For Keyes, killing was a high-level operation. The less residue, the more perfect the crime. And when it was over, he walked away like he'd just solved a complex equation, one with no words, but the right answer. To the world, those deaths were strange accidents. To the cops, they were dead-end mysteries. But to Keyes, they were clean programs running at full efficiency. No glitches, no repeats, no echo. There was only one thing all his victims had in common. They never saw him coming. And by the time they realized, they never got the chance to tell. Essex, Vermont. A town so quiet, people didn't bother locking their back doors. The ash trees lining the streets leaned gently in the early summer breeze. On a June evening in 2011, 2 people vanished, and no one noticed. No screams, no broken glass, no signs of a struggle. Just. The next morning, Bill and Lorraine Currier didn't show up to work. No one called the police. No one thought something terrible had happened. They were simply absent. Everything in the house was untouched. Wallets, phones, food in the fridge. No forced entry, just one window on the ground floor slightly ajar. A detail so small the cops thought it was the wind. No blood. No broken furniture. No suspicions. And the case slipped quietly into the archives. It wasn't until over a year later, when Israel Keyes was arrested in Texas and began to talk, that the couple's names surfaced again. Not in a missing persons file, but in his own voice, flat, mechanical, like someone reading assembly instructions, step by step, precise, cold. He said he chose Vermont because it's quiet. No one notices strangers. He drove thousands of miles from Alaska, rented a car locally, used Google Earth to pick the perfect house. Isolated, no dogs, no street lights too close. He dug up a kill kit he'd buried 2 years earlier in the nearby woods. Inside, handgun, zip ties, flashlight, duct tape, a shovel. He broke in at midnight. Bill and Lorraine were asleep. He woke them with a flashlight straight to the eyes. No yelling, no immediate violence. He told them it was a robbery. Said if they cooperated, they'd be fine. They believed him. Tragically, they believed him. He tied them up, drove them to an abandoned farmhouse he had scouted and cleared in advance. Bill tried to fight. Keyes shot him, 1 round to the head. Lorraine was left tied in the basement. She saw everything. He raped her, then strangled her. He buried their bodies behind the house, burned their belongings, erased the scene. No one saw, no one heard. Months later, the house was demolished by the city. No one knew it had once been a crime scene. No evidence, no clues. Nothing left to exhume. When asked why he confessed to that one, Keyes shrugged. his confessions, the Currier case was one of the few he told in full, like a template for perfection. Random targets. No connection, no motive. No bodies, no suspicion. To the world, Bill and Lorraine were just two people who once existed. To their family, they were a wound with no answer. To the cops, they were a file with pages missing. But to Keyes, they were a success, a program executed with perfect precision. No drift, no revision. No one heard them die. No one saw them dragged from their bed. And if Keyes hadn't spoken, the world might never have known they had lived at all. A death with no sound and no alarm. Just two names quietly crossed off the employee roster the next morning. No funeral, no goodbye, just Tom gone, as if they were never there. And that's the kind of kill Keyes called perfect. Anchorage, Alaska. Night of February 1st, 2012. Temperatures below -10 Celsius. Wind slicing through the ice like silent blades. Inside a small coffee kiosk called Common Grounds, 18-year-old Samantha Koenig was working the late shift alone. A quiet night. No customers, no sound. Just a few more hours till her shift ended. A man approached the counter, thick coat, hood pulled tight over his face. He motioned for a drink. Samantha turned to make the coffee, never seeing the gun being drawn. The surveillance video lasted just a few minutes, but everything played out like a silent film. No screams, no visible violence, only her eyes. A flicker of fear when she realized something was off. A reluctant nod. Then the side door opened. They vanished into the dark. He forced her into a truck, tied her hands, blindfolded her, drove her home, where his girlfriend and young daughter were asleep. He kept Samantha in a shed, sealed tight, then went to bed beside his child. Didn't kill her right away. Didn't rush. He wanted to keep her alive long enough to make use of her. The next day, he raped her, then killed her, slowly, deliberately, with a rope he'd used before. No hesitation, no hurry. He cleaned the body, brushed her hair, placed the corpse in a freezer, then went on vacation with his family. On a beach in the Caribbean, he drank cocktails, took smiling photos with his daughter. Meanwhile, Samantha lay frozen, eyes still open, skin turning the color of paper. 2 weeks later, back home, the performance continued. He built a stage, pulled the body from the freezer, applied light makeup, sewed her eyelids open with fishing line, combed her hair, propped her head against the wall, placed a copy of the Anchorage Daily News, dated February 13th, beside her, as proof she was still alive. A Polaroid photo, shot from an angle, dim lighting, a fake smile, a corpse made to play the role of the living in a play he'd written for an audience of one, himself. He put the photo in an envelope along with a ransom note and dropped it in a public mailbox. Her family received it and thought maybe there was still hope. They prayed, made calls, offered rewards. All the while, he watched their reactions, like a viewer watching the movie he'd already directed. Samantha wasn't just a victim. She was a prop, a character he had staged to perfection. From the eyelids, stitched open to the stiff posture sculpted by his hands. A corpse forced to say, "I'm still here." But in truth, she had been dead before anyone even started looking. Keyes didn't want the ransom money. He wasn't trying to prolong the game. He just wanted to see. Could he make the world believe in a dead girl who smiled? And the answer was yes. For a few days, all of Anchorage hoped. Samantha's family hoped. The media took notice. And it was all just a thin coat of paint over a death that had frozen long before. After taking the photo, he dismembered her body, placed the pieces in trash bags. In the dark, he dropped them into the Matanuska River, its water so cold it held everything still at the bottom, like a moving grave. No flowers, no coffin, no goodbyes. All he left behind was a newspaper, a photo, and a fracture no one could see, that somewhere in a snow-covered city, a girl had been murdered, kept on ice, forced to smile, to serve a performance staged by a man whose name the world didn't yet know. But he was there, watching and smiling back, with eyes so hollow, no light could reach inside. After sending the photo of Samantha with the newspaper and ransom note, Israel Keyes moved into the next phase of his performance, a chase only he knew was happening, and everyone else was being forced to join. He took Samantha's ATM card and started withdrawing cash, not once, multiple times, with planning, with distance, and with intention. February 29, $500 withdrawn in Anchorage. March 1, Wilcox, Arizona. 3 days later, New Mexico. Then Humble, Texas. Then Shepherd. Finally, Lufkin. Each location was hundreds of miles apart, each withdrawal spaced out by days. He didn't linger at the machines. He moved past them like a cold wind. Cameras caught only a blur. A hooded jacket, dark glasses, no fingerprints, no voice, nothing to trace. Just one thing in common. He always knew where the cameras were and exactly what they would capture, almost like he wanted them to. The car he drove was a white Ford Focus, ordinary, cheap, forgettable. He rented it under a fake name, never used a credit card. Cash only. Phone? No. He used burner phones, disposable and gone. GPS? Disabled. Every detail had been pre-programmed, from gas station stops to rest intervals. He didn't sleep in major hotels, just truck stops, roadside motels, or sometimes a tent in the woods. In the trunk, masks, rope, guns, wigs. But on this trip, he wasn't planning to kill. He was just pulling the string. To law enforcement, it looked chaotic, disconnected. They didn't think this was a seasoned killer on the run. They thought this might be someone new, just getting started. But the truth was the opposite. Keyes wasn't beginning. He was winding down. This wasn't the first time he ran. It was the first time he allowed himself to be seen. The FBI traced every camera, each image pinned to a giant map. A trail of faint footprints across the country. But no one knew where it would end. No one knew what waited after the next withdrawal. He left no digital trace, no searches, no logins, no phone calls. The journey was a silent leap from dead zone to dead zone, as if he were dancing to a soundtrack only he could hear. Each time money landed in the account, he withdrew the maximum limit, never more, never less. Precise, like a banker reconciling his books. That drove the FBI mad. They couldn't find the flaw. No mistakes, no cracks. Just that same silhouette. The slight hunch, uneven gait, black hoodie, repeating in every ATM video like a taunt. Public alerts went out. License plates flashed on TV screens. But he didn't stop. Each withdrawal was a quiet provocation. Not overt, not loud, but deliberate. As if he were drawing the map in reverse. Not to find the road, but to see how long it would take for them to catch up. And even with hundreds of agents, dozens of cameras, and thousands of hours of data, the FBI couldn't close the gap. He wasn't fast, he was just ahead. One beat, always one beat ahead. Until March 13, 2012. Lufkin, Texas. The white Ford Focus was pulled over. No chase, no gunfire, no shouting. When officers approached the window, he just looked at them, as if he'd been waiting for the scene all along. Like an ending already written. He didn't lose. He simply stopped, because the game had reached its final move. And now, it was his turn to speak, in a way only he knew how to make people listen. March 13, 2012. Lufkin, Texas. A foggy morning. A white Ford Focus pulled over on the roadside by a local patrol officer. No sirens. No high-speed chase. Just a soft stop. As if the driver had decided it was time for the curtains to fall. The officer approached. Inside the car, a man in a black hoodie sat with his head bowed. No reaction, no gun drawn, no attempt to flee. When asked to step out, he opened the door slowly, raised his hands without hesitation. Bare wrists, silent, like someone used to being cuffed. His name, Israel Keys. No prior record, no mental health history. Not on any FBI watch list. But in the trunk, a hard plastic mask, dark wig, a Ruger 22 semi-auto, handcuffs, a folding knife, rubber gloves, and a stack of cash. Most of it withdrawn from Samantha Koenig's ATM card. Everything he needed to kill again was ready. But he didn't use it, not out of hesitation, but because he didn't need to anymore. At the local police station, Keys didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't ask why he'd been stopped, didn't protest, didn't slam fists or shout injustice. He just sat down, back straight, stared at the white wall like he was waiting for it to turn into a screen. The cops didn't understand the FBI hadn't arrived. But one thing was clear. He wasn't like any killer they'd seen before. A few hours later, he began to speak. Not because he was coerced, not because he was cornered. He just started talking, calmly, like someone describing a fishing trip. No regret, no tears, no laughter. He recounted the most horrifying acts with the flat tone of a technician. Precise, undisturbed. He told them about Samantha, about the abduction, the freezing, the staged photo. Every detail made investigators' skin crawl. But he didn't stop there. When he saw the stunned faces around him, he gave a faint smile, like testing how much truth someone can survive. The FBI quickly stepped in. They didn't know what they were dealing with. A killer for money, for revenge, for delusion. But the answer lay in Keys' eyes. None of the above. He killed for nothing. No emotion, no reason, no backstory. He killed because he could. While in custody, he kept scribbling into notebooks, odd symbols, nameless maps. He spoke only when he chose to, and every time he did, he controlled the room. The air froze. Investigators became audience, and he, the writer, the director, performing a play whose victims had long been gone. The most terrifying part, he didn't hide anything, but he didn't reveal it all either. He dripped information like a warden handing scraps to starving inmates. If you were impatient, you got nothing. If you could sit with the silence, you might hear a fragment of the dark. When asked, "Why didn't you resist arrest?" he simply said, "Because I was at the end." One simple line, but inside it, an entire campaign of murder orchestrated by a mind that never missed a beat. He knew when to start, he knew when to stop, and he chose the day to be caught. Not because he lost, but because it felt like the right time to talk. The hunt for Israel Keys didn't end in gunfire or screaming. No explosions, no blood. Just a man opening his car door, raising his hands, and stepping into the second act of his performance. An act where we, the public, became the audience. And he, still the storyteller, sitting in a room with no light, smiling for no reason at all. The interrogation room is always small. 4 white walls, a cold metal table, 2 chairs facing each other, a single camera dead in the ceiling, waiting for movement. But when Israel Keys walked in, it stopped being an interrogation room. It became a stage. He didn't deflect, didn't deny, didn't show remorse. He simply told, one case at a time, out of order, without logic, as if he were picking cards from a shuffled deck, and speaking softly, clearly, without blinking. Samantha, the Curriers, the unnamed woman in New York, the body near Crescent Lake. He didn't call them by name. He called them the June one, the body in the woods, the cabin. Words with no blood, no weight, as if he were talking about objects, not people. He didn't remember ages, didn't recall faces, but he remembered exactly how they gasped in those final seconds. Remembered the creak of floorboards when Lorraine Currier was dragged. Remembered the smell of wet soil clinging to the corpse. The small details, like splinters under the skin. When the investigators looked confused or couldn't take it anymore, he paused, sipped coffee, waited a few seconds, then delivered a line colder than the last. He didn't shout to be heard. He whispered, so everyone else had to be quiet. He didn't confess to cleanse himself. He spoke to control. Every word a string, tightening around the listener's throat. Sometimes he stopped mid-sentence, smiled faintly, as if he'd remembered something interesting. But then he wouldn't finish. Just let it hang. Let the listener imagine the rest. And in that space, fear began to grow roots. Keys didn't spill everything. He rationed it like crumbs. Enough to keep you from leaving. Never enough to see the whole table. Every time the FBI thought they were close, he changed the subject or went quiet. When they started losing interest, he'd drop a new detail, like tossing a bone to a starving dog. And they'd come running again. Even the most seasoned investigators found themselves dragged into something strange. No one was in charge of the room anymore. Everyone became a listener, and he knew that. One time, he spoke of a case in Oregon, No missing person file, no clear victim. But he described in detail how he pulled a woman from her car, cuffed her, took her into the woods, strangled her. When the FBI checked, there was a vague report about a missing woman that year. No one had linked it to a crime, not until he spoke. When asked why he didn't stop after Samantha, when he knew he was being hunted, he looked the investigator in the eye and said, "I don't work like that. I don't kill based on emotion. I kill based on a plan. And if there's still an unused kit, I'm still killing." The interrogations went on for weeks. Each day, he gave a little more. A new bloodstain, another memory. No excuses, no apologies, just narration. As if there were a list in his head that needed reading. A performance in which he was the only actor, and we, the audience, locked in a room with no windows. Once, he looked up and asked, "Are you afraid?" No one answered. He smiled, nodded, turned back to the wall, silent. Israel Keyes didn't need to raise his voice to be terrifying. He only needed to speak. And the terrifying part was, you believed him. Not because he was convincing, but because his calm was too real to fake. He didn't dominate the room with muscle, not with rage. He dominated with silence, with a terrifying calm, and with the stories he dropped like poison into still water. Stories of death, told like bedtime fables. But these stories had no happy ending, only darkness. And him, sitting at the center of it, smiling, as if no one ever really left. The interrogation room was cold as steel, and in it, truth didn't spill. It bled, one slow drop at a time. But what unsettled investigators the most wasn't what Israel Keyes confessed to. It was what he hinted at, then left hanging. Fragments of death with no names, no dates, no witnesses. He confessed to each murder the way someone might recall a faded camping trip. But in between the verifiable moments were loose details, hazy, half-formed, impossible to tell if they were fact or fiction. There was a girl in New York, he said, eyes down. Don't remember her name. Black hair. I think it was 2009. Buried her near a lake. He paused, sipped cold coffee, and moved on. The FBI scoured every missing persons file in New York. No match. No report. No family. Maybe no one ever looked for her. Or maybe no one ever knew she was gone. Or maybe she never existed outside of his voice. But the terrifying part was, to Keyes, existence didn't matter. Only the act of killing did. Names, identities, families. Those were concerns for the world after the blood had dried. He once described a hiker he encountered in the Washington mountains. An impulsive attack, no motive, no robbery, no anger. He left the body somewhere in the woods, where winter would bury the ground under layers of frost so deep they wouldn't thaw until the next season. He wasn't sure how old the man was. Maybe 30? Maybe 40? He shrugged. The story stopped there. No follow-up, nothing more. Investigators pushed. He smiled, shook his head. I don't always keep the details. I don't need them. What he kept was the burial site, how the body was disposed of, the final sound the victim made, but names, addresses, faces, no. To Keyes, victims weren't people. They were targets, a test for the system he'd built. Death was a metric of precision, nothing else. The no-record murders drove the FBI mad. How do you investigate a murder when no one even knows someone died? How do you reconstruct a past when only the killer remembers it existed? Keyes used society's indifference as a weapon. People no one noticed, no one called, no one sought justice for. To him, they were perfect prey. No echo, no tears, just Mehita gone. When asked how many victims there were, he gave no number. But in his final cell, they found a drawing made in blood. 11 skulls, each with hollow eyes, no names, no memories. The FBI believes that's the minimum count. Keyes didn't confirm, didn't deny. He just left it there. A blank space for others to fill with fear. One investigator once said, "We can't confirm how many people he killed, not because he lied, but because he didn't need to tell the truth." Most serial killers leave a signature, a pattern, a message, a need to be noticed. Keyes did the opposite. He killed like a technician, left nothing, was noticed by no one, and moved on, as if nothing had happened. What lingers is not detail, but distortion. In the dark he left behind, no one knows what's real. No one is sure of anything, except this: some people died, and maybe some are still dying inside his memory, where he is the only one who remembers, and the only one who doesn't care to share. That silence is the deepest stain. Anchorage Correctional Complex, Alaska. December 2012. Outside, the snow fell thick as ash, like the stage was being buried before the curtain could close. Inside, beneath yellow lights flickering against stained white walls, Israel Keyes decided to end the performance he had directed for over a decade. That morning, the guards called out. No response. They unlocked the door. He was there, not fully alive, but not quite cold yet. Wrist slashed to the tendon. A bedsheet wrapped around his neck, looped between the bars of a bunk bed. Death came quietly. But the cell was not silent. On the floor, written in blood from his wrists, he left behind the one thing neither the FBI nor the public was ever prepared to see. 11 skulls, drawn by finger, crude, uneven, but unmistakable. This was a symbol, and he had written the final period. No suicide note, no apology, no message, just skulls with no names, no captions, each one a brutal reminder that he remained in control. He chose how to die, he chose when, and he chose to leave behind a number. One that, to this day, the FBI cannot say with certainty what it meant. 11 victims? 11 used kill kits? 11 sins? 11 nightmares untold? No one knows. And maybe that not knowing was the point. Keyes' death was the perfect conclusion to the architecture he'd built. Not because he feared court. He didn't need court. Justice was a concept for others. He needed control. And absolute control for Keyes meant choosing the exact moment to vanish. The FBI lost their only witness, the only man, the only thread that linked a dozen invisible crimes. And he knew it. His death wasn't an escape. It was a move, a final step, a closing line of code. No more interviews, no more leads, only blanks, unidentified bodies, kill kits buried somewhere across the heart of America. Still waiting, and maybe never to be found. They're like landmines buried deep. They don't tick, they don't explode, they just rest, sleeping beside his secrets. For the agents who had followed him for months, the news hit like a fist. Not because they pitied him, but because they understood. He had won, not in court, but in the war over information. He said exactly what he wanted, then cut the wire. His prison cell became his final crime scene. No one else died that night, but dozens were left alive without answers. Those skulls weren't drawings. They were black holes of memory. Each one a question mark etched in red. Who were they? And worse, who might still be alive, not knowing they're already on the list? In death, Keyes kept the one thing he valued most: secrecy. No one could make him speak. No one could make him stay. And when he ended the monologue, what we were left with was a song cut off halfway. No final chord. A death like a story abandoned mid-page, then folded, then burned. No one read it all. No one knew it all. But everyone felt the cold at the back of their neck. And somewhere out there, beneath frozen ground, there are still names never spoken aloud. And he exited the stage on cue. No bow, no applause, only silence. A silence that bled skulls. After Israel Keyes took his own life, the FBI didn't close the case. They widened it. Because with his death, the door to the truth wasn't shut. It was locked from the inside. What he took with him wasn't guilt. It was the map, the coordinates, the list. Investigators began chasing fragments, sliced up confessions, scrawled maps, meaningless symbols in a notebook. Audio recordings so faint they sounded like static. But the deeper they went, the clearer it became. Keyes hadn't left behind a trail. He left a labyrinth, no entry point, no center, no way out. He had once spoken of kill kits, murder supplies buried across the United States, each kit a crime waiting to happen, or one that already had. Some were recovered: guns, masks, knives, zip ties, bleach, shovels, and sometimes date-stamped notes. But those were just the ones they found. How many more are still out there, buried beneath moss and frost, waiting in silence? The FBI mapped out everywhere Keyes had traveled. Bank records, receipts, GPS logs. But that was only the surface. He used rental cars, paid in cash, turned off his phone. Sometimes he drove thousands of miles just to bury a single plastic container, and drove right back. No murder, no missing person, no suspicion. But years later, someone near that spot would disappear. The problem was, no one knew where to begin. Because Keyes had no pattern. He didn't kill close to home, didn't target a specific type, left no signature. He could murder a couple in Vermont, then months later abduct a young woman in Alaska and vanish. On paper, two worlds. But in his mind, two dots connected by a wire buried beneath snow. Agents revisited old missing persons files. Hundreds, thousands. Searching for victims that matched his vague descriptions. A white woman traveling alone. A man with a tattoo on his arm. Red shoes left near a lake. Details adrift. No dates, no fixed locations. Just puzzle pieces that would never be enough. What stalled the investigation wasn't that Keyes lied. It was that he never told the whole truth. He didn't fool the FBI with fiction. He fooled them with fragments, just enough to make them believe. Then silence. Every story he told was a hallway. But at the end, there was only a blank wall. One agent said, "We know he killed more. We know there are others. But every lead he left us ends in a dead end." As if he severed the wires before we could even trace them. Even when they returned to towns he'd passed through, reviewed footage, interviewed locals, searched for clues, there was nothing. He left no trace. It was like he'd edited himself out of reality as it was still unfolding. Keyes' death wasn't closure. It was theft. He took with him the answer to a puzzle only he ever understood. What remains for the FBI and the world are boot prints lost in old snow, plastic buckets buried beneath the nation, and the slow, aching realization. This time, evil wasn't caught. It simply retreated. Israel Keyes' legacy isn't the number of people he killed. It's the number he made the world never know had died. And that was the perfect victory. A victory made of fog. A victory carved from the permanent absence of answers. Israel Keyes didn't scream in court. He didn't rant about voices in his head. He didn't blame his childhood or God or the dark shade of dark. He wasn't insane. He wasn't delusional. After hours of interviews, psychological analysts came to a conclusion. He was fully sane, in fact above average intelligence, emotionally controlled, logically precise, sane enough to kill, cold enough not to explain. That comforts no one. If anything, it makes it worse, because it proves something. He wasn't some warped outlier. He was just a person. A man who could share dinner with you, go camping with his daughter, make small talk with a neighbor, and bury someone's body in the ground without a single tremor in his hands. The world likes to call men like him monsters, demons, not human. But Keyes was different. He didn't want to be seen as abnormal. He called himself an ordinary man, just one who was good at planning. And when you look at how he killed, how he moved, how he disappeared, you realize he was telling the truth. We search for something alien in evil, so we can feel safe from it. But Keyes blurred that line. He didn't growl in the dark. He wore a jacket, paid in cash, and knew exactly when to stop. In a modern world where everything leaves a trace, Keyes moved like a cold wind. Quiet, traceless. Not because he was supernatural, but because he calculated like an engineer. And if one man could kill like that, undetected, how many others are walking among us? Not killing today, not making a sound, just planning and waiting. Israel Keyes is dead, but he left behind an absence, not just in the criminal record, but in the minds of those who once believed evil was easy to spot. The truth is, we don't know. We may never know. And that is what makes him, and men like him, the kind of fear without a name, without a face, without a sound, just a human. Some stories don't need an ending. because they are the crack that never stops spreading through consciousness. The case of Israel Keys is one of those cracks. Not because it was too bloody, but because it was too quiet. No screams, no warnings, nothing left behind but a silence that sinks deep into the mind. Keys didn't just kill, he made people question their own ability to recognize danger. He forced us to ask, if someone like him could live among us, pitch a tent in the woods, shop for groceries, drive next to you on the highway, then what else is waiting beneath the flat surface of daily life? Maybe the real fear doesn't live in the knife. Maybe it lives in the space between unexplained absences, in the people who go missing without anyone looking, in the bodies still waiting for names. Thanks for staying with me to the end of this journey. A journey that doesn't lead to truth, but opens the door to even more questions. And maybe that is the only fitting ending to a real-life nightmare. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you in the next one. He wasn't terrifying because he killed. He was terrifying because he made me realize evil can live quietly in someone who smiles, who camps, and who knows exactly when to disappear. Do you think he was the only one? Leave your thoughts in the comments.